The morning sun cast long shadows across the White House lawn as Catherine received the most surprising phone call of her life. She had been working in her small office at the Historical Society when her assistant burst through the door with wide eyes and trembling hands. "Catherine, you need to take this call immediately," her assistant whispered, holding out the phone as if it might explode. On the other end of the line was a calm, professional voice from the White House Protocol Office. They were calling to invite her to a special farewell ceremony. Catherine's heart raced as she listened to the details. She had spent years researching American historical artifacts, but she never imagined her work would catch the attention of the highest office in the land. The invitation was for a private ceremony that would take place in just 3 days. Catherine would be one of only 12 people invited to witness what the caller described as a moment of profound historical significance. They wouldn't reveal more details over the phone, but they assured her that her expertise in American relics and her recent research paper on presidential artifacts had made her the perfect candidate for this honor. Catherine hung up the phone in complete shock. Her colleagues gathered around her desk, all talking at once, trying to understand what had just happened. She explained the call as best she could, but even she didn't fully grasp why she had been chosen. Her research had focused on lesser-known artifacts from various presidential administrations, but she considered herself just a small fish in a very large pond of historians. That evening, Catherine called her elderly grandmother, who had always been her biggest supporter. Her grandmother listened quietly as Catherine shared the news, then chuckled softly. "My dear, sometimes the universe has plans for us that we can't see coming," her grandmother said. "Your passion for preserving history has been noticed by someone very important. This isn't just about your research, it's about who you are as a person." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine researched everything she could about presidential farewell ceremonies, trying to understand what might await her. She chose her most professional outfit and practiced what she might say if called upon to speak. Her mind raced with possibilities about what kind of historical moment she was about to witness. Friends and family called constantly, offering congratulations and asking for details she simply didn't have. The mystery of the invitation only added to her excitement and nervousness. Catherine had dedicated her career to understanding the past, but now she was about to become part of history herself. On the morning of the ceremony, Catherine stood before her mirror, taking deep breaths and reminding herself that she belonged there. Whatever was about to happen, she had earned her place through years of dedication to preserving and understanding American history. As she left her apartment and headed toward what would become the most memorable day of her life, Catherine had no idea that she was about to receive something that would change not just her career, but her entire understanding of her role in preserving the nation's heritage. The White House gates looked more imposing than Catherine had ever imagined. As her taxi pulled up to the security checkpoint, she felt her palms growing sweaty despite the cool morning air. The guards were thorough but polite, checking her identification multiple times against their list before waving her through. Walking up the curved driveway, Catherine marveled at the perfectly manicured grounds. Every blade of grass seemed to be in its proper place, and the flower beds displayed colors so vibrant they looked almost artificial. She had visited the White House on public tours before, but this felt completely different. Today she was walking through these halls as an invited guest, not just another tourist taking pictures. A young aide named Michael met her at the entrance. He had kind eyes and a warm smile that immediately helped ease Catherine's nerves. As they walked through the corridors, Michael pointed out various paintings and artifacts, clearly enjoying his role as an informal tour guide. "The president specifically requested that you see some of the historical pieces in the residence before the ceremony," Michael explained as they climbed a grand staircase. "He's quite impressed with your research on presidential artifacts." They paused in front of a display case containing items from George Washington's presidency. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as she recognized several pieces she had only seen in photographs. There was Washington's personal compass, a silver inkwell used to sign important documents, and a fragment of the flag that had flown over his inauguration. "These are incredible," Catherine whispered, pressing her face close to the glass. "I've been studying these pieces for years, but seeing them in person is completely different." Michael smiled knowingly. "Wait until you see what's planned for today's ceremony. The president has something very special in mind." They continued through several more rooms, each filled with treasures from America's past. Catherine saw furniture that had belonged to Thomas Jefferson, a clock that had ticked away the hours during Abraham Lincoln's presidency, and books that had sat on Theodore Roosevelt's personal shelf. Each item told a story, and Catherine felt like she was walking through the pages of a living history book. In the Blue Room, they encountered two other invited guests, a museum curator from Philadelphia and a professor of American history from Harvard. Catherine was relieved to meet others who shared her passion for preserving the past. They exchanged excited whispers about the mystery surrounding today's event. "Has anyone told you what we're actually here for?" asked the professor, adjusting his glasses nervously. The three historians shook their heads in unison. They were all accomplished in their fields, but none of them had any real idea why they had been specifically chosen for this ceremony. As they were led toward the East Room, Catherine noticed increased activity among the White House staff. People moved with purpose and urgency, but there was also an air of excitement that seemed to permeate the entire building. Whatever was about to happen, it was clearly significant enough to have everyone's full attention. The East Room had been prepared for a small, intimate gathering. Elegant chairs were arranged in precise rows facing a podium decorated with both American flags and presidential seals. Catherine took her assigned seat in the front row, her heart beating faster as she realized that in just a few minutes, she would be face to face with one of the most powerful people in the world. The atmosphere in the East Room changed dramatically when President Trump entered. His presence filled the space with an energy that made everyone sit up straighter in their chairs. He moved with confidence, greeting each guest personally before taking his position at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "thank you for joining me today for what I believe will be remembered as a truly historic moment." Catherine felt her hands trembling slightly as she listened. The president's eyes swept across the small audience, and when they briefly met hers, she felt a jolt of recognition, as if he already knew exactly who she was and why she was there. "Throughout my presidency, I have been privileged to be the temporary guardian of countless treasures that belong to the American people," President Trump continued. "These artifacts represent our shared heritage, our struggles, our triumphs, and our dreams for the future." Behind the president, two staff members wheeled in a covered display case. Catherine's curiosity piqued as she tried to imagine what could be hidden beneath the elegant blue cloth. The other guests leaned forward in their chairs, equally captivated by the mystery. "Today marks not just the end of my time in this office, but also the beginning of a new chapter for one of our nation's most precious relics," the president announced. "For too long, this particular artifact has remained hidden in storage, known only to a select few. It deserves to be shared with the world, to inspire future generations just as it has inspired those who came before us." The president gestured toward Catherine, causing her heart to nearly stop beating. "Miss Catherine, would you please join me here?" Catherine's legs felt like jelly as she stood up. The short walk to the podium felt like the longest journey of her life. Every eye in the room was focused on her, and she could hear the soft clicking of cameras capturing this moment for posterity. "Catherine," the president said warmly as she reached his side, "your research on presidential artifacts and your dedication to preserving American history has not gone unnoticed. Your recent paper on forgotten relics of the early presidency particularly impressed my staff." Catherine managed to find her voice. "Thank you, Mr. President. It's an incredible honor to be here today." The president smiled and moved toward the covered display case. "What I'm about to show you has been in federal custody for over 2 centuries. It has witnessed some of the most important moments in our nation's history, yet very few Americans have ever seen it." With dramatic flair, President Trump pulled away the blue cloth, revealing an ornate wooden box sitting on a velvet cushion. The box itself was clearly ancient, its dark wood polished to a rich shine despite its obvious age. Intricate brass fittings decorated the corners and edges, and a small brass nameplate was visible on the front. "This box," the president announced, "belonged to George Washington himself. It contained his most personal correspondence during the Revolutionary War and his early presidency. Inside this box are letters that shape the very foundation of our democracy." Catherine gasped audibly. She had read about this box in historical documents but had assumed it was lost to time. To see it here in perfect condition was like witnessing a miracle. The president opened the box carefully, revealing several aged documents tied with faded ribbon. Even from her position beside him, Catherine could see the distinctive handwriting she had studied in countless reproductions. These letters, the president continued, represent the private thoughts and fears of a man who was building a nation from nothing. They show his humanity, his doubts, and his unwavering commitment to the principles we still hold dear today. President Trump carefully lifted one of the letters from the box, handling it with the reverence it deserved. The paper was yellowed with age but remarkably well preserved, and Catherine could make out portions of George Washington's distinctive handwriting, even from where she stood. This particular letter, the president explained, was written by Washington to his wife Martha during one of the darkest periods of the Revolutionary War. In it, he expresses his fears about the future of the colonies and his doubts about his own ability to lead the Continental Army to victory. Catherine listened in amazement as the president read a brief excerpt. Washington's words, written over 200 years ago, spoke of his love for his country and his determination to see it through to independence, despite overwhelming odds against success. But there's something else in this collection that makes it even more extraordinary, the president continued, reaching deeper into the box. Hidden beneath these letters is something that has remained a secret for generations. He carefully moved aside several documents to reveal a small, leather-wrapped bundle. With gentle movements, he unwrapped it to expose a silver medallion about the size of a pocket watch. The medallion caught the light from the chandeliers above, sending small sparkles dancing across the walls of the East Room. This medallion, the president announced, was given to George Washington by the Marquis de Lafayette as a symbol of the friendship between America and France. It's made from silver that was melted down from coins contributed by French citizens who supported the American cause. Catherine's eyes widened as she studied the intricate engravings on the medallion. On one side was an eagle with outstretched wings, and on the other was an inscription in both English and French that spoke of eternal friendship and shared liberty. For over 2 centuries, this medallion has been kept safe by each administration, passed down from president to president as a reminder of the international bonds that helped create our nation, the president explained. It has been present at every major decision, every crisis, every moment of triumph that has shaped America. The weight of what she was witnessing began to settle on Catherine's shoulders. This wasn't just a historical artifact. It was a living piece of the American story, something that had been touched by the hands of every president since Washington himself. Mr. President, Catherine said softly, why are you showing this to us today? Shouldn't something this precious remain in the secured presidential collection? President Trump smiled, and Catherine could see something almost paternal in his expression. Catherine, that's exactly why you're here. This medallion, this entire collection, deserves to be seen by the American people. It shouldn't remain hidden in storage where only a few privileged individuals can appreciate its significance. He paused, looking directly into Catherine's eyes. I've decided that it's time for these artifacts to find a new home, a place where they can be properly displayed and shared with future generations of Americans who deserve to see their heritage. Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. Was the president suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? The implications of his words were staggering, and she wasn't sure she was prepared for what might come next. The other guests in the room sat in complete silence, recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Camera flashes continued to capture every moment, ensuring that this ceremony would be documented for history books yet to be written. President Trump carefully placed the medallion back in its leather wrapping and returned it to the wooden box. Catherine, your life's work has been dedicated to ensuring that American history is preserved and shared. Today I want to entrust you with the most important responsibility of your career. The moment President Trump spoke those words, Catherine felt as though time had stopped completely. Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Around the room she could hear the soft whispers of the other guests and the continuous clicking of cameras documenting this extraordinary moment. Catherine, the president continued, his voice taking on a more formal tone. By the authority vested in me as President of the United States, I hereby entrust you with the guardianship of George Washington's personal correspondence collection and the Lafayette Medallion. Catherine's hands began to shake uncontrollably. She looked around the room, half expecting someone to tell her this was all an elaborate joke or that she was dreaming. But the serious expressions on everyone's faces confirmed that this was really happening. "Mr. President," Catherine managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't understand. How can you give these to me? They belong to the American people." President Trump nodded approvingly at her response. "You're absolutely right, Catherine. They do belong to the American people. That's exactly why I'm giving them to you. You have the knowledge, the passion, and the integrity to ensure that these treasures are properly cared for and made available for all Americans to see and appreciate." He gestured toward a stack of official documents that had been placed on a nearby table. "These papers establish a special trust fund and foundation that will support the preservation and public display of these artifacts. You will serve as the chief curator and guardian, with full authority to decide how they should be exhibited and shared." Catherine felt tears welling up in her eyes as the magnitude of this responsibility began to sink in. She had spent her entire career studying artifacts like these from a distance, reading about them in books and seeing them in photographs. Now she was being asked to become their protector and champion. "The foundation will provide you with all the resources you need," the president explained. "You'll have funding for a proper museum space, security systems, conservation equipment, and a full staff to help you create educational programs around these pieces." One of the president's aides stepped forward with an ornate wooden box, different from the one containing Washington's letters. Inside this box was an official document bearing the presidential seal, along with a special key that would unlock the display case containing the artifacts. "This key," the president said as he lifted it from the box, "has been held by every American president since 1789. Today, I'm placing it in your hands, trusting that you will use it wisely to unlock not just this collection, but the hearts and minds of Americans who need to understand their heritage." Catherine accepted the key with trembling hands. It was heavier than she had expected, made of what appeared to be the same silver as the Lafayette medallion. The weight of it seemed to represent the enormous responsibility she was accepting. "I promise you, Mr. President," Catherine said, finding her voice and speaking with growing confidence, "that I will dedicate my life to ensuring these artifacts are treated with the respect and reverence they deserve. They will be displayed in a way that honors both their historical significance and their power to inspire future generations." The president smiled broadly and extended his hand to Catherine. As they shook hands, camera flashes illuminated the room like lightning, capturing this historic transfer of custody for posterity. "I have complete faith in you, Catherine," the president said. "Your research has shown me that you understand not just the historical facts surrounding these pieces, but their deeper meaning to our national identity. You see them not as mere objects, but as living connections to the people who built this country." Catherine looked down at the key in her palm, then back at the wooden box containing Washington's letters and the precious medallion. She was no longer just a historian studying the past. She had become a guardian of America's most treasured memories. As the formal ceremony concluded, Catherine found herself standing alone with the wooden box containing George Washington's letters and the Lafayette medallion. The other guests had moved to an adjacent room for refreshments, but she remained frozen in place, staring at the artifacts that were now her responsibility. President Trump approached her quietly, his security detail maintaining a respectful distance. "Catherine, I can see that you're feeling overwhelmed. That's natural, and it's actually reassuring to me. Someone who wasn't overwhelmed by this responsibility probably wouldn't be the right person for the job." Catherine looked up at him, still clutching the silver key. "Mr. President, may I ask why you chose me? There are so many more experienced historians and museum directors who would seem more qualified for something this important." The president smiled thoughtfully. "Do you remember the conclusion of your research paper on forgotten presidential artifacts? The part where you wrote about how history isn't just about famous people and major events, but about the small personal moments that reveal the humanity behind the legends?" Catherine nodded, surprised that he had read her work so carefully. "That paragraph told me everything I needed to know about who you are," the president continued. "You understand that these artifacts aren't valuable because they're old or rare. They're valuable because they connect us to real people who faced real challenges and found ways to overcome them." He gestured toward the box. "When you hold that medallion, You're touching something that George Washington held during some of the most difficult decisions of his life. When you read those letters, you're seeing into the heart of a man who was just as uncertain about the future as we sometimes are today. Catherine carefully opened the box and looked again at the precious contents. This time, instead of feeling intimidated, she felt a strange sense of connection to the past. These weren't just museum pieces. They were messages from previous generations, proof that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they believed in something greater than themselves. "I've been thinking about where to establish the foundation," Catherine said, her confidence growing. "There's an old building near Independence Hall in Philadelphia that would be perfect. It's historically significant but currently unused. With the right renovation, it could become a beautiful space for displaying these artifacts." President Trump nodded approvingly. "That sounds like an excellent choice. Philadelphia is where so much of our nation's story began. Having these pieces there would create a natural connection between past and present." Catherine began to envision the possibilities. She could create exhibits that would allow visitors to experience these artifacts in context, understanding not just what they were, but why they mattered. She could develop educational programs for schools, bringing groups of children to see firsthand the objects that had shaped their country's destiny. "There's something else I want to tell you," the president said, lowering his voice slightly. "This medallion has a tradition attached to it. Every president who has held it has made a wish for the future of America. Some of those wishes have been recorded, others have remained private, but all of them have been made with hope and faith in the American people." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of wishes? Lincoln wished for healing after the Civil War. Roosevelt wished for strength during the Depression. Kennedy wished for unity during the space race. Each president has added their hopes to the legacy of this medallion. The president reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "Before I give this collection to you, I want to add my own wish to its history." He carefully placed the paper inside the wooden box, next to the wrapped medallion. "Someday when you feel the time is right, you can read what I wished for America's future. But for now, I want it to remain with these other pieces of our nation's story." Catherine realized that she was witnessing the creation of history in real time. Generations from now, other historians would study this moment, trying to understand the significance of President Trump's decision to entrust these artifacts to her care. As they prepared to rejoin the other guests, Catherine felt a profound sense of purpose settling over her. She was no longer just someone who studied history. She had become someone who would help shape how future generations understood their past. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the beautifully renovated building near Independence Hall, watching as workers carefully installed the final display cases for the Washington collection. The transformation had been remarkable. What was once a forgotten warehouse had become an elegant museum space that honored both the artifacts it would house and the visitors who would come to see them. The Lafayette medallion occupied the centerpiece display, surrounded by Washington's letters and other related documents. Special lighting had been installed to protect the delicate materials, while still allowing visitors to see every detail. Interactive displays would help guests understand the historical context of each piece, bringing the past to life in ways Catherine had only dreamed about during her years as a researcher. The opening ceremony was scheduled for the following week, and Catherine had invited President Trump to cut the ribbon. Media attention had been building for months, with historians and educators from around the world expressing excitement about this new approach to preserving and sharing America's heritage. Catherine's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her grandmother, who had called every day since the White House ceremony to check on Catherine's progress. "How are you feeling, dear?" her grandmother asked in her gentle voice. "Nervous, excited, terrified, and grateful all at the same time," Catherine admitted with a laugh. "I keep thinking about how this all started with that unexpected phone call. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives come when we least expect them," her grandmother replied. "You were ready for this opportunity because of all the years you spent preparing, even when you didn't know what you were preparing for." Catherine walked through the museum space, imagining how it would look filled with visitors. She had designed educational programs for students of all ages, created partnerships with schools across the country, and developed special exhibits that would rotate regularly to keep the museum fresh and engaging. The foundation that President Trump had established was working exactly as he had promised. Catherine had a full staff of conservators, educators, and security professionals who shared her passion for making history accessible to everyone. The funding was sufficient not only to maintain the current collection, but also to acquire additional artifacts that would complement the Washington materials. Later that evening, Catherine sat alone in her office, holding the silver key that had been passed down through generations of presidents. She thought about the enormous chain of custody that had brought these artifacts to her care, from George Washington himself, through every subsequent president, to this moment when she was responsible for sharing them with the world. She opened the wooden box one more time and carefully unfolded President Trump's written wish, which she had finally decided to read. His words were simple but powerful. "I wish for all Americans to remember that our greatest strength has always come from ordinary people, doing extraordinary things when their country needed them most." Catherine smiled as she read those words. They perfectly captured what she hoped visitors would feel when they saw these artifacts. History wasn't just about famous names and important dates. It was about real people making difficult choices and believing in something bigger than themselves. Tomorrow, workers would begin installing the final exhibits. Next week, the doors would open to the public. And for years to come, people would walk through these halls and touch the same history that had shaped their nation. Catherine carefully returned the medallion to its case and locked the display with the presidential key. As she turned off the lights and left the museum, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The artifacts were safe, the foundation was strong, and America's heritage would continue to inspire future generations. Walking out into the Philadelphia evening, Catherine could see Independence Hall in the distance, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. It seemed fitting that Washington's most personal artifacts would rest so close to where the nation itself had been born. History had come full circle, and Catherine had played her part in ensuring that the story would continue to be told.